House, a debate for Nebraska's 2nd Congressional District. Sponsored by the Omaha World Herald and produced by UNO Television. The candidates running for Nebraska's 2nd Congressional seat are Republican incumbent Lee Terry, who is 52 years old and lives in Omaha. He has been Nebraska's 2nd Congressional District representative since 1999, is married, and has 3 children. The Democratic challenger is Brad Ashford, who is 64 years old and lives in Omaha. He has been a Nebraska state senator from 1987 to 1995 and from 2007 to present. He is married and has 3 children. Your host and moderator for tonight's debate is Robin Tisver, senior political reporter for the Omaha World Herald.
Hello and welcome to this evening's debate in the race for Congress in Nebraska's 2nd Congressional District. I'm Robin Tisver, senior political reporter at the Omaha World Herald. I'll be your moderator this evening. Thank you for joining us. We are coming to you from the University of Nebraska at Omaha's campus. This debate is sponsored by the World Herald and produced by the staff and students at UNO Television. We're looking forward to a robust exchange of views between Republican nominee Lee Terry, an 8-term incumbent, and Democratic nominee Brad Ashford, a Nebraska state senator. About our format, we're going to rotate the order of questions that the candidates will get, or who will go first in answering the questions. They're each going to get about 60 seconds to respond. In the middle of the debate, the candidates will get to ask each other a question. Otherwise, I'm going to ask the questions. I also will determine if a follow-up is in order. This response should be no more than 30 seconds. We have a light system to keep track of time. When you see the red light, gentlemen, wrap it up. The campaigns drew numbers to determine who will begin and end. Mr. Ashford, you'll get the first crack at the first question. You're also going to get the last word in closing statements. If everyone's ready, let's get started.
We're ready. Thanks, Robin.
You are both veteran lawmakers. Tell us about your single biggest legislative accomplishment.
First of all, Robin, thank you for being here and moderating this debate. Thanks to UNO and thanks to the Omaha World Herald. It's been a great experience for me to serve in the unicameral legislature where we have no aisles, we have no political parties. The most important thing, I think, for me in my experience over 16 years is developing how to work together on tough issues. I suppose if I was to pick one thing, and the one thing that I think was plaguing Nebraska for so many years was the tough issue of juvenile justice and juvenile crime. And over the last 3 to 4 years, we in the legislature, working across party lines, unanimously passed major reform of our juvenile justice system. The goal is to keep young people in their homes, in their schools, keep them out of trouble, keep them out of detention where necessary, and make this state a better place to live for them. So I think that would be my number one. There have been so many wonderful experiences, but that would be the one I would think of.
That's
also
great. Mr. Terry.
Well, thank you. I too want to thank the Omaha World Herald for sponsoring this, and the UNO staff here has done wonderful jobs here in the past for this. And I've passed a lot of bills in my time in the United States Congress. In fact, currently right now I'm rated number 6th in the number of bills that are passed, and in the top 2% of actually the bills that I've written and passed that have actually had Senate co-sponsors or a equal bill on the Senate side, and all of them have been bipartisan bills, and when they've taken a vote, they've been bipartisan. And one of my goals is for prosperity, future of our country is energy independence, and so a lot of the bills that I have passed that I'm proud of have to do with energy. Making our resources accessible, but also in the world of renewable fuels as well. So hydrogen, I got to drive a hydrogen car, and it was me and a Democrat that were actually able to get a bill passed that allowed for research of hydrogen vehicles as well as others.
So the hydrogen bill was your top legislative accomplishment?
Well, I'd say there's others like Keystone Pipeline that have gotten more accomplishment, but you know, breaking through a hydrogen barrier to get to the future energy of the world, I think in the long term that's going to be one of the top bills. May not think about right now, but 20 years from now people are going to look back at that bill and how it changed the world.
Thank you. The next question goes to Mr. Terry. As veteran lawmakers, you both have had to cast some difficult votes. Tell us about a vote you regret. What was the vote? Why do you regret it? And what did you learn from it?
Well, that's a good point, because you take so many votes and you spend the time to research, and you call people and you get the feedback from the experts in your district. I think the one vote that you look from, you know, Sunday morning quarterbacking, but my vote on Iraq, that was one that probably, if we had all of the facts, most of my colleagues and I would have done it differently. No Child Left Behind was certainly not implemented the way it was written, and frankly, we need to change that, and we passed a bill in Congress this year to take it back and take the burdens off of our public school systems that mandated.
Terry, you're going to have to wrap up. Brad or Mr. Ashford?
I would agree. I've had thousands and thousands of bills that I have had an opportunity to vote on, and many bills that we vote on. Of course, in our system is a nonpartisan legislature where we have 3 rounds of debate on every bill, and there are plenty of votes that I've taken, maybe that I would like to get back.
Just one.
That's a tough question. I think maybe the one vote that I would like to take back was LB 1059, and that goes back a number of years. That was a bill that eventually I did vote for the amendments on it years later, but basically what LB 1059 did was lowered property tax by broadening the tax base for school finance. And had I thought more about it at that time, that was in 62 or 63 or 92, 93, I think that maybe would a vote I might have voted differently.
Thank you very much. We're going to turn now to foreign policy. As you both know, there is a lot going on in the world. Mr. Ashford, you get the first question. We're going to ask on this first question that you keep it kind of short, 15, 30 seconds, because we're going to, we're going to burrow in deeper into foreign policy as we go. The first question, what criteria should the U.S. use in determining when to risk American lives on foreign soil?
The number one criteria would be the safety and welfare of the citizens of the United States. Okay. That's the criteria we use. I do support what's going on now with the airstrikes in Syria and Iraq. ISIS, in my view, is clearly a threat to the people of the United States, and building the coalition, I think, is the appropriate mechanism at this point.
Thank you, Brad. Thank you, Mr. Ashford. Mr. Terry?
It has to be in the national security interests of our nation. So if you are under threat of attack, then I think you have to respond. And certainly with ISIL and the meetings that I have attended, they are a clear threat.
Okay, thank you. The next question goes to Mr. Terry. The war in Afghanistan has gone on for 13 years. It has cost the U.S. the lives of more than 2,200 servicemen and women, and its dollar cost could stretch into the hundreds of billions. Looking back, do you think a long-running ground war in Afghanistan was the right tactic in the war on terror? Why and why not?
Well, again, I'll state with the premise that was it in our national security interests, and after 9/11, to remove the Taliban and the Al-Qaeda that was stationed and working out of Afghanistan, absolutely was necessary to go into Afghanistan. It's been a long process, but I think we need to stay. We need to work until Afghanistan can stand on their own 2 legs and defend themselves from the Taliban.
So you are not for the withdrawal?
I want the withdrawal to occur as they are able to take care of themselves, and I don't want to do what happened in Iraq. I think one of the lessons learned here is that in Iraq, when you pull out too fast and you create a vacuum because the government isn't ready yet, that vacuum's going to be filled, and that vacuum in Iraq was filled by ISIL, and that could happen again in Afghanistan if we pull out too quickly.
Mr. Ashford, I'm going to give you a few more seconds there.
Okay. So what's amazing to me is the effectiveness of our military in the Middle East. And I agree with Lee on this. I think we should maintain our presence in Afghanistan until we've made some progress on the new government that's just been elected in Afghanistan. That has been a plus, but we had to act when we acted. Terrorism occurred to a great extent because of what was going on in Afghanistan before we invaded. I think we need to stay a little longer. I agree with Lee that leaving Afghanistan, or the way we approached Afghanistan after the invasion, did create a vacuum, and leaving Iraq, or I'm sorry, Iraq left a vacuum in Iraq, and so we see the problems with ISIS today. So I think we need to stay in Afghanistan until the democracy is set.
Okay, thank you very much. I believe this goes to Mr. Ashford first. Some critics have blamed President Obama for the current upheaval in Iraq, saying he should have kept American soldiers on the ground in that country. Do you agree?
Hindsight is 20/20, and what one could say, I think, is that had we left troops on the borders with Syria, had a large, we could have maintained some training mission and some support mission on the border with Syria, theoretically, and in and around Baghdad and other parts of Iraq. That train has left the station at this point, and I don't see, I really don't see us coming back into Iraq with that kind of force now or in the future.
Okay. Mr. Terry?
Well, I agree that hindsight is 20/20. The reality is that the laissez-faire policy, foreign policy of the president of not helping with the establishment of the government and pulling people, their military out too quickly so they weren't trained. When the government started, in essence, punishing segments of their society, then they left to join ISIL. All of that, we should have been much more involved in that to prevent that from happening. If we would have been more active, we may not have had ISIL. I do want to say that as I support the president on his strikes. I think that's the right thing to do. We have to do it. It's in our national security interest to do that. But we got to make sure that this government and their military they're the ones. And the Kurds should be armed as well, and I appreciate the Germans arming the Kurds. They're good fighters. I think the boots on the ground in Iraq should remain Iraqi boots.
Okay. You did recently vote against arming the Syrian rebels. Can you explain your position on that?
Yeah, thank you for letting me do that. I was the only one in our entire delegation, in fact, region, that voted against that. And that was to arm the Free Syrian Army and train them. And I've seen just too many incidences where we trained a group of people, and then as we're training them, they turn their weapons on us. And Syria is one of those places where it's really difficult to find that just because they're fighting Assad doesn't mean they're our friends. And so I worried that they would just turn on the United States whenever they would get the chance, and we would have trained them to do that.
Thank you. Mr. Ashford, do you agree?
Here's what I think about this. It's impossible for me to know about the vote because I didn't see I wasn't briefed. I don't know about the intricacies of that congressional decision. But what I do believe is, and I don't understand this, maybe Lee can explain it, how Congress could have left Washington after 4 days coming back from the summer vacation and had a vote on training Syrian moderate rebels without a thorough discussion and debate about where that was going to go. And I think those questions need to be asked, and I think the authority needs to be discussed and debated. What authority do we have in making this move? So I would say stay in Washington, debate at least for a couple days. There was only 4 days of congressional meeting after the summer recess. I think it should have been thoroughly debated at least over the weekend after that vote.
Mr. Terry, you get a chance to respond.
And there were several days of discussion, and the process was the president asked for Congress to make the authority, that the president said he wanted it in the continuing resolution, and we had a deadline because of that continuing resolution. That's the answer.
Okay. I think the American public deserves to understand fully what the extent not only of that vote is, but what the further appropriations are going to be required, and what is are we going to go to the 2003 resolution for the incursion or invasion of Iraq, or do we need a new resolution? At least that could have been debated on some basis that time.
I think we'll move on, if that's okay. We're going to talk a little bit about jobs in the economy. Mr. Terry, I think you are up first.
Okay.
Years ago, America emerged from the recession, but wages continue to stagnate and in many cases are not keeping up with inflation. What would you propose Congress do to boost family incomes?
Well, the first thing is that we have to continue to expand our economy, and there's a lot of things that we should be doing to make sure that our economy is growing. Jobs with jobs creates pressure on wages. In fact, I'm seeing wages in our metropolitan area going up. So there's open manufacturing jobs right now that are $20 an hour, where maybe a couple years ago they would have been far less than that. But in order to expand our economy, we've got to reform our tax code. We've got to use the energy resources that we have so we don't have to spend the money to bring it in from foreign countries that don't like us. We need to teach the skills that are necessary. The best way to get people high-paying jobs is to give them the skills that are necessary. And our veterans coming back have some skills, but they need other skills. And there was a bill in the legislature that Brad Ashford could have pushed in providing workforce training and skills for veterans, but he wouldn't allow it out of the committee.
I think, Mr. Ashford, you're up.
Well, actually, I supported job training bills in the legislature. I've pushed vocational, 21st century vocational education. I have supported certainly training for veterans, especially disabled veterans, job training for disabled veterans. We passed a bill in 2014 to do that. The bill that Congressman Terry that Lee's talking about talked about giving further resources directly to employers. I wanted to see the money go for training directly to our veterans. But let me say this about the question.
Yes.
I think that we need to unleash our economy. We have spent now, Lee's been in Congress for 14 years. We have not had corporate tax reform in 14 years. We have to bring the $2 trillion the $2 trillion that is located outside of the United States, it's lodged outside of the United States, bring it back to America, get our country moving again.
Do you want to comment on the corporate tax reform?
Well, yeah, and as a matter of fact, it has to be reformed, and that's been one of my goals in Congress. We've had our president that actually talked about making our corporate tax code flatter, simpler. It has to be done. The rest of the world has gone this way, and what we have is an old code for a different time. It has to be modernized, and we need our president and the Senate to get engaged. The House drafted, Ways and Means Committee drafted a model, flatter, simpler bill, which then Harry Reid said they'd never take up.
Okay. I think we're going to move on to the next question here. And Mr. Ashford, I think it's your question. Do you think the growing income inequality is a problem? Do you think that the growing income inequality in the nation is a problem? And if so, what, if anything, should the federal government do about it?
Well, in the last 14, 15 years, the GDP has increased by about 40%, and the median family income has increased in the United States less than 8%. So there is a gap, and we need to push equal pay for equal work for women. I think the minimum wage is important because traditionally, since the 1930s, when the minimum wage was 25 cents, Congress has always worked together to incrementally increase the minimum wage, so those at the lower end of the pay scale can receive a better wage. And if Congress needs to work together to get these things passed. It's been 5 years since the minimum wage was passed, so I think that's important. Also, infrastructure is important. I worked with Deb Fisher to pass LB 84, which funded roads and bridges in our state. We can't get a roads bill out of the Congress. They pass a 3-month extension. You have to work together to build a coalition to do infrastructure that what creates good-paying jobs.
Just a real quick follow-up here, a simple question. As you know, on the ballot this fall will be a minimum wage question in Nebraska. Will you vote for it, yes
Yep.
or no? Yes. So the question now is to you. Do you think there's a problem with the growing income inequality in this nation?
Well, I think we have too many lower income people, and the reality is more of our middle class is taking a hard hit in this economy. Not only many of them that had good paying jobs have to go to a underemployment situation, but now because of the president's health care bill, full-timers are now being put into a position where they're now part-timers. So what the solution here, first of all, is we do have to strengthen our economy, but the reality is the way that people are going to get a $20 to $25 an hour job is to have the skills that are necessary. So I don't want people to just go from $7 to $10. I'm trying to figure out a system that if you're a single mother and you're struggling at minimum wage, we want to make sure that you have the skills necessary to earn $20 an hour, and those jobs are open in Omaha, Nebraska right now.
Same question to you. Minimum wage, it's on the Nebraska ballot, yes or no?
If we have demand on jobs, they're going to go up naturally and much higher than $10 an hour.
How will you vote?
I am not going to support that because I think we can do a better job of providing skills necessary for them to earn a much larger pay than what the minimum wage would bring. And my son, who's a baker at Baker's as a 16-year-old, he's kind of hoping it goes up.
Thank you very much. Brad, did you want to?
Well, I think 70% of Americans on minimum wage today are women. And they have, there's a lot of them are single moms, and yes, they want to earn $20 an hour. I think that's absolutely correct. That's what they should want. We need to do job training. We need to have 21st century vocational education in the schools. But the minimum wage, we're talking about low-wage earners that are trying to get off of welfare, and they need to get paid a reasonable wage.
Okay.
4% of those that are earning an hourly wage are earning a minimum wage, like my son.
Thank you. I think we're going to move on. Our next question is on Social Security. And I think, Mr. Terry, you get the question first. Social Security payroll taxes are currently capped at $117,000 of income. Some say it's time to either raise that cap or scrap it altogether and tax higher income levels. Would you support one of those options to help ensure the long-term solvency of Social Security? If not, how would you shore up Social Security?
Well, Social Security, we have to deal with that issue. There's no doubt about it. But Social Security is a social promise. We need to let the seniors know that we're going to make sure that they are kept whole. And the reality is, by 2040, as the Social Security Administration says, if we do nothing, Robin, then there will be a 25% automatic reduction of everyone's benefits, and we have to stop that. So my goal here is to put everything on the table. So yes, increase the cap, increase the age. We should be looking at every solution, and the solution's going to be Republicans and Democrats working together, holding their hands together, and coming up with a solution. Each side's going to have to give on something and accept something else that the other side wants to get this fixed. So far, only the Republican side of the aisle has been willing to move in some direction.
So just to recap, you would raise the cap and you would raise the retirement age.
I think everything should be on the table and negotiate those.
Thank you. Mr. Ashford.
Well, here's the problem. If Congress does nothing, then by 2040, you're right. I mean, the two trust funds will be less. That's the problem. Congress does nothing. They have done absolutely, the only thing we get out of Congress is a proposal to privatize Social Security.
That's not true.
Well, privatizing Social Security doesn't make any sense to me. What we need, I agree with Lee, we need to work together to find a solution. And as far as raising the cap and we just raised the retirement age to 67. I don't see that as a viable option at this point. But I think we do have to take a look at all the options. But we have to take privatization of Social Security off the table. And all that did was delay an opportunity for the two sides. They're not working. We don't pass anything in Congress.
Do you
think?
So
I think.
I know, and I wanted to ask Mr. Ashford one quick question. Do you think Mr. Terry supported privatization?
He'll have to tell you. I mean, there was certainly a vote on privatizing in the budget that privatized, or that was Medicare, but privatizing Social Security. Well, maybe you didn't. Well, then you can answer it.
But I tell you, there was nothing on the table, Brad.
Well,
that's
certainly during the Bush. I'm not disingenuous. During the Bush administration, of course,
the President Bush did tout that, but there was never a vote.
Well, you supported it at that time, Lee.
You said take it off the table. It hasn't been on the table for 8 years, Brad.
Well, it was on the table during the Bush administration, and you got behind it. So all I'm saying, whether you did or didn't, maybe you didn't, all I'm saying is it should be off the table.
But you're telling people it's on the table and take it off. It hasn't been on in 8.
Well,
and
nothing's
if
happened.
The Democrats would come to the table on this, we could get a deal.
Okay, gentlemen.
That's the problem. We got to get rid of this animosity and get together.
Just real quick here, because I'm going to...
started it. Using it as a privatization.
All right.
Brad,
you supported it.
Mr. Ashford, real quick here. What would you do to shore up Social Security?
Well,
would you consider raising the cap?
Sure.
Yes or no?
I think it has to be on the table. I don't think raising the we just raised the retirement age, and I don't think at this point it's necessary. I think we need to work year in and year out, provide the congressional oversight, and I agree it has to be done in a collaborative, bipartisan manner, and that's fine. But no, I don't think raising the retirement age at this point is necessary. I think we can take the 2 trust funds and it's the bedrock of our social system. I think is retirees having Social Security. So I think that's what I would recommend.
I think we're going to move now to that portion of the debate where you two get to ask each other a question. Mr. Terry, you're going to get to go first.
Well, Brad, I'm particularly curious about one area that you are deeply involved in, and that's coddling criminals. And you refuse to allow any new prisons to be built. You are the main sponsor of what is called the good time law, which just simply takes whatever the court sentenced and cuts it in half. And you fought the governor on the bill that he supported that would have done reforms to quote-unquote good time, which is now just half time. And asked, one of the reforms was simply, you have to earn your good time. And you fought the governor on that, and you refused to let it come out of your committee. Why don't you want reforms to good time? And why would you do that to the people when violent criminals are being released?
Okay. Think the question.
Thanks, Lee, for the question. I think 20 months ago, the Department of Corrections came to us, to me, and said, look, we're at 140% of capacity. Our law provides that when we get to 140% of capacity in our Department of Corrections, that the governor may call an emergency, and he did not. So we took the issue and we reformed the prison system. We had no votes on a massive reform of our prison system in LB 907. We did that following on from a significant reform in our juvenile justice system. The Department of Corrections did not follow the good time law that was in effect, so that instead of adding on time for inmates who misbehaved, what the Department of Corrections was doing was putting them in administrative segregation and not adding on additional time. The Department of Corrections did not follow the law. They didn't follow the law on mandatory minimum sentences that we passed either. And I'll tell you what, we're not coddling prisoners, Lee, when we increase penalties for sexual predators. We increase mandatory minimum sentences for gun crimes, which has resulted in number of new, so to say, inmates in our prison system. So I think we've got significant reform with unanimous approval by the legislature and signed by the governor.
Mr. Terry, would you like to comment?
Well, the reality, though, is there are 2 issues. One is with the miscalculation, but the bill that you passed cut every sentence in half without having to earn that.
No.
And yes.
No, it didn't.
And so there's 2 issues here, Brad, and that was some of the reforms that the governor wanted, and the bill that I was referring to, it was never passed out of your committee that you were the chair of. And the governor...
We have 7 different...
Yes, of course, yes.
We have 7 different good time laws that have been passed over the last 25 years. The governor actually asked for a more lenient good time law a few years ago to alleviate prison overcrowding. The good time law we have now is an administrative sanction. It isn't... every judge, and you know this, every judge in all district judges in this state know very well what a sentence means and what it is. We have minimum and maximum sentences. They can make the sentences as harsh or as lenient as they wish. It's when they get into the prison system that good time is used as an administrative sanction. It was not used by the Department of Corrections.
Mr. Ashford.
Okay, sorry. I answered to both, but
and I apologize. Mr. Ashford, it is time for you to ask Mr. Terry a question.
We've had a discussion about wages in the middle class, and it still today, women's salaries, what they earn, is not equal to men's. And in 2010, or at least on 2009, the Lilly Ledbetter Act passed the House, and you voted no. In 2013, the Paycheck Fairness Act, which would have amended the Equal Pay Act to strengthen remedies for people who experience pay discrimination because of sex, failed, and you voted no. How do you justify those votes?
Well, first of all, I want women and everyone to have equal wages. We have a constitutional amendment that requires that. We have Nebraska state laws that require that. We have an EEOC set up, both nationally and state, to deal with those issues. So if there's someone that is receiving less wages for the exact same job, they have a legal route to go through, both the courts and the administrative way through the government. So the remedies already exist. And the Lilly Ledbetter Act was to take the statute of limitations off. And you know that there's reasons, because we're both lawyers and grads of law of Creighton Law School, there's a reason why you don't do a civil case 20 years later. And that's what that bill was allowing to do, and that would open up the door on everything else. And the Paycheck Fairness Act was another act that was just dovetailed into another Democratic motion that is a procedural one that we voted against.
Mr. Ashford?
Well, on Lilly Ledbetter, Lee, you also know that when you're an employee and you are a victim of discrimination of your pay, if you're a woman and you're paid less than someone working right next to you, it's very unlikely, if you need that job to feed your family, it's very unlikely that during the course of your employment that you're going to threaten yourself with a lawsuit. All this does, this Lilly Ledbetter Act, is after the final paycheck is received, they have 180 days to file suit. I don't think that's an unreasonable action.
I think you've misunderstood that, because there is time when you discover the point, and it wasn't 120 days after the last paycheck. This was discovered, or she learned about it, years later, and that they wanted to remove the typical civil case statute of limitations or repose on that. So if it was 120 days, there wouldn't have been an issue on this.
Okay.
I think we're going to move on to health care. I believe it is Mr. Ashford. You are up next.
Okay.
You are on record supporting only some of the provisions in the health care law, including the requirement that insurance companies cannot deny coverage for a pre-existing condition. But you oppose the mandates in the law, which pay for many of the popular provisions in the bill. How can you get those provisions without the mandate?
First of all, the Affordable Care Act as passed, I would not have voted for it, because it was not a bipartisan bill. I would not have voted for it. It's too big a bill to have it just go through with just Democrats and not Republicans. So having said that, no, I don't support the employer mandate, because employers already have a tax benefit for providing insurance. They have the employees who receive the insurance also aren't paying taxes on the income. And quite frankly, I do agree that employers might make a full-time employee a part-time employee, and it's not worth it. There are 150 million Americans covered by employers' insurance, and I think that will continue. As far as other mandates, what bothers me about the tax, if you don't pay your premium as an individual, I think much more work needs to be done on that, and there were amendments in the Senate before the bill passed that would have triggered some relief for policy owners when the premiums go up exponentially. So I think there's a lot of work to be done. I do support pre-existing condition coverage.
Thank
obviously.
you. The one thing is, and I just kind of want to...
I'm sorry, I saw that.
Hi, that's okay. I want to burrow into this a little bit.
Okay.
A lot of folks say that you can't have the pre-existing without the mandate, because if I am not required to have insurance, I'm going to wait until I'm sick to get health care coverage if the insurance company is required to take me on?
No, the mandate, I don't think you need an employer mandate because you have the exchanges and people buy policies on the exchanges. What I'm saying is that there was in the Senate, prior to the Senate bill being passed, before it went to the House, Lee remembers this, he was there, prior to it going to the House, there were efforts made to, if a premium, you have to buy insurance, you pay a tax. If the premium goes up by an exorbitant amount, or 10%, 20%, whatever the amount is, that there was some trigger mechanism in place. And all I'm saying is, I think there's plenty of money in the system to provide the insurance for pre-existing conditions. It's 17% of our economy. I don't think that one prohibits the other.
Thank you very much. Mr. Terry, you believe the Affordable Health Care Act needs to be repealed. What would you tell those people who are now able to afford health care because of the new law, or those people with pre-existing conditions who are also now able to purchase affordable health care because of the law?
Well, first of all, I do think it was a horrible law, and it's caused a lot of damage within our economy. And I've met people that have been advantaged from that. But far more people have come up to me and said about the high costs of their insurance now. And businesses have told me about how they've changed employees from full-time to part-time, or that if they don't get something done, some relief, they may even actually go out of business. Doctors especially, I don't know how many times I've gone into doctor's office and met with them. But it's changed the way they work with the patients, and it's really changed the doctor-patient relationship. Anything that is replaced, it will be replaced immediately. And pre-existing, I will admit, if Republicans would have taken the pre-existing issue and worked with it instead of thinking that the states were going to do it with their high-cost funds, we wouldn't have this bill today. So pre-existing will be part of any replacement bill.
Okay, but picture yourself sitting there with somebody who can now afford health care because of this law. What would you tell them?
Well, that they're going to have health care. If they're low income, they're still going to have Medicare, but they may even have a better policy with what we're able to give them. And there will maybe even be some type of rebates that would be allowed to make sure that the next level had access. But the reality is, the way that Obamacare is done now, it's really driving up the cost of them. Yep. Brad and I don't need maternity care, but we're paying for it. So those are just there's thousands of those type of things in there that are driving up the cost. So the reality is, if you manage it better, the one thing that,
thank you,
Robin,
Mr. Terry. You're
just
running over. I've got to be stricter here, so.
Can I just?
Yes, quickly.
Point. I mean, my point is, I think, Lee, is that you're right. There are lots of things that can be done. But voting to repeal it 56 times instead of trying to solve the problem, that's what I have an issue on with you. I think we need to solve it. We need to get it done now. We need to have certainty in the system. And the way to do that is to work across the aisle and find a way to fix it, not wait 4 years to do it. And I think that's an issue that I would bring.
Mr. Chair.
Yeah, in that regard, the 56 times, well, I think 3 or 4 were actually repealed. The other number that you do are actually trying to make changes to those. Like, instead of 30 hours, then the mandate on the employers, you move it back to 40, because that's one of the things that's causing employers to force people to part-time.
Let's move.
The other 50 are those type of corrections.
Okay, let's move on here. I think this one goes to Mr. Ashford. Let's step back a little bit from this whole debate about affordable health care. The key reason the law was passed was to provide coverage for uninsured Americans. Fundamentally, do you think it's the federal government's job to make sure that all Americans have access to affordable health care?
Yes.
Yes. Terry? Mr. Terry?
Is it a right? It is something we should do, absolutely. And there's a variety of ways that we could have worked within the system without reshuffling all of the chairs on the Titanic. One of the things in Obamacare that I actually like is a medical home that will actually reduce the cost for the patient.
We're going to wrap up and head to the next question. And Terry, Mr. Terry, it's your question. I'm having trouble this evening calling you Mr. Terry and Mr. Ashford. I apologize. Gallup polls suggest that trust in government has never been lower. It's even lower than it was during Watergate. Tell me, what can Congress do to regain that trust?
Well, I think you gain the trust by showing that you can actually get together and work on the major issues that have to be done. Every bill that I've introduced and worked on, I've worked with the Democrats from the beginning. That's why a couple years ago, by my peers, was named one of the top 10 Republicans to work with. And I think it's my leadership style is that you bring everybody in at the beginning of the process and you work through those issues. One of the most liberal members in Congress is my ranking member on my subcommittee, and we worked together and came to a compromise that got to the president's desk and was signed into law.
The question, though, has to do with trust, and people's have lost trust in their government. What do you tell those folks? How would you regain that trust?
Well, first of all, I'm as equally as frustrated as they are. It is so frustrating to do bills like, again, on Obamacare, to just change the rule from 30 hours back to 40, where there's great bipartisan support. But we have one entity that's dysfunctional right now in the Senate, not allowing that bill to go through the Senate. And it's frustrating for all of us.
Mr. Ashford.
Well, two wrongs don't make a right. The ACA, if we're going to use that as an example, ACA should have been a bipartisan effort. It should have taken a little longer, and I think the people would have had trust in the resolution of that had that occurred. But then we needed to get back to fixing it, and we haven't fixed it, and 4 years have gone by, and trust in government is eroded because of that and other things. What I see happening is an intense partisan divide in the Congress, and that's what I hear people saying to me, and I don't think it was that way. I don't think it was that way when Tip O'Neill was there and Ronald Reagan was there. I don't think it was that way when Everett Dirksen and Lyndon Johnson got together and signed the Civil Rights Act. I don't think those things, I think things have gotten much, much worse. And I don't know what the reason is. Maybe it's Citizens United, maybe it's gerrymandering, whatever it is, but I think members of Congress need to work extraordinarily hard to cross that bridge and put solutions over party. And that's what we've learned in the legislature. I think that's what has to happen again in the Congress. I'm not saying it can't happen, but the trust is gone because there's a polarization based on partisanship, in my view.
Thank you very much. We're going to move on to immigration. And Mr. Ashford, you're up. At the heart of the immigration debate is how to deal with the estimated 12 million illegal immigrants living in this country. We know that both of you think more work needs to be done to secure the border. But after that, would you support a pathway to citizenship? And if so, why?
Well, the state of Nebraska has had to pay the freight for the lack of action by the Congress. We passed a bill on benefits. We passed a bill on employer verification. We have to pay the cost of foster care. All these things are state responsibilities and costs because Congress, this is a federal responsibility. The immigration system is a federal constitutional system that has to be amended or reformed by Congress. Every time we get to a debate, it's all about the borders. I think we should take the Senate bill, which was passed in a bipartisan manner by the Senate. Republicans and Democrats alike passed the bill. It provides significantly more money for border security. Obviously, border security is the #1.
And did it have a pathway to citizenship?
And it had criteria that had to be met before you can obtain citizenship. It talked about legal status, and it defined what legal status was, whether it was a young person, an adult, how they got here. The bill Speaker Boehner won't put the darn thing up for a vote, and we're getting killed in Nebraska financially because the Congress will not act on that bill. So yes, there would be citizenship is in the Senate bill, but it's a 13-year there's provisional residency, there are work permits, there's visas. But I'm not saying that has to be the end result, but there needs to be a debate on the floor of the House, and that has not occurred for years and years and years.
Mr. Ashford, Mr. Terry, you get a few extra minutes, a few extra seconds on this.
Well, first of all, I don't like the Senate bill. and I don't like the absolute reward of citizenship, a pathway to citizenship. I think there's other ways to handle that, but there's so much that we actually agree on. But the Senate says, unless there's a pathway to citizenship, we're not even going to discuss anything else. And so when we agree on border security and we agree on E-Verify, where employers check to see if they're here appropriately, we know that there's repairs to the system that have to be made, because even legal immigration that I support and want and we absolutely need in the United States, including keeping our STEM college-educated people here instead of sending them back to compete with us economically. These are all things we agree on. Why don't we get together and pass the things we can agree on, and then see where we can work out a compromise on what we do to help the people that are already here.
Mr. Ashford raised this issue, and it's been talked about a lot, about a compromise being, instead of full citizenship for those folks who are living here illegally, maybe some kind of legal status where they could stay here without full citizenship.
Yeah, I think that should be on the table for discussion, and I'm open for that discussion. That would be a guest worker statute, so if you've been here and you haven't committed any crimes, then there may be a different way to deal with you, and a guest worker would probably be the avenue.
Mr. Ashford, I'll give you a few seconds here.
You have to debate. We have dealt with immigration in the Nebraska legislature across party lines, and we've passed bills on it. If a guest were, what I would like to see is, let's deal with the children first. Those that came here as babies, that have gone through high school, are going to college in Nebraska, that will become, hopefully, will become part of our economy. Let's deal with, at least, let's give them a pathway to citizenship first. And then we can deal with these other things. But at least let's get this on the table so we can debate it. Yeah. Lee, it hasn't been up for a debate. And I think your points can be debated. But let's get to debate it. That's fine.
Okay, gentlemen. We're going to turn now to what we're calling the quick question portion of our debate.
That's a relief, probably.
Yeah, well, now we're not asking that you guys, it's a yes or no question, but we are asking that you keep it in kind of the 30-second range, unless, and I believe I'll go with Mr. Terry. What do you think? Do you think the Keystone Pipeline will ever be built?
It needs to be built. It's important to our national energy security. It's important to our economy. It creates jobs here in Nebraska. But I don't think it's going to be built until we change presidents, until there's a new president.
And after that, will it be built?
I think it will be.
What do you think,
yes,
Mr. Ashford?
I think it will be. The legislature took this issue up in special session. We approved a process for the pipeline. It had environmental concerns met, I believe, in the bill, LB1 eventually in the special session.
Okay.
And I think once the process is completed on the federal side, I think it will be approved and built.
Thank you. Mr. Ashford, you get the next. What nation do you think poses the biggest long-term threat to the United States?
Iran.
And why?
I think they put Israel is our strongest ally in the Middle East. They have been our strongest ally in the Middle East since 1948. And we've been embroiled in conflict in Iraq and Afghanistan for legitimate reasons, because of the Taliban and so forth and so on. We've talked about that. But I do think that, to some extent, the two-state solution, which Prime Minister Netanyahu has been attempting to work out with the Palestinians, has been retarded to some extent because the American focus on the other. Are we off the clock?
Yeah.
I'm sorry, it's 30 seconds. Okay. All right, I apologize. But I think Iran is our number one.
Okay. I ask a follow-up, so I'll take that one. What nation do you think poses the greatest threat?
Absolutely, it's Iran, and as they're now, I think, deceptively still enriching uranium and plutonium, and to have a nuclear Iran is scary for the world.
For the world. Mr. Terry, do you believe that climate change is man-made?
I believe that there's that we have an impact on our economy. I mean, on our environment, and that's why I drive a hybrid. I want to lessen my impact on the environment. I do believe that we're in a period of climate change, as the Earth has always been in some sort of flux. But I think we have a responsibility to reduce our impact on the environment when we can.
So you believe that man may
Have some impact, but I have debated friends who think it's 100% man-made.
Mr. Ashford, do you believe that climate change is man-made?
Yes.
We are moving on to, and it's Mr. Ashford. Do you support President Obama's decision to send 3,000 American soldiers to West Africa to fight Ebola?
That's a tough one. I think we need to, when I first heard about that, my reaction was
30 seconds.
My reaction was that the African Union should be primarily responsible for security and for keeping track of what's going on, and sending medical help is what I would support, and the African Union providing the security. That would be my initial reaction without looking further into it.
Mr. Terry?
I think the Ebola crisis is real, and we have to deal with that before it spreads into Europe and then in the United States, so absolutely support the President's effort to send 3,000 troops to build the facilities.
Next question, Mr. Terry. Name a congressman, past or present, who you especially admire, and explain why.
One of my favorite members of Congress is actually retiring this year, and it's John Dingell, Democrat from Detroit area, and he is the consummate legislator. We don't always agree because he is on the other side of the aisle, but I love how he works with everybody, Republican or Democrat. I'm working with him on a data security bill right now, and he's just such a base of knowledge and a really decent guy.
Thank you very much.
Member of Congress or
yes.
President?
Well, name a congressman, past or present, who you especially admire.
Without question, it's Tip O'Neill.
Okay.
Because I always admired Ronald Reagan because of his ability to communicate, and Tip O'Neill because he had the ability to work with President Reagan and do amazing things. That's gone now. That whole way of doing business is gone. So I guess what my hope is, should I be so fortunate to be elected, is to hopefully go back to those days when Tip O'Neill and Ronald Reagan made things happen in the Congress.
Thank you. It's time now for closing statements. Prior to the debate and after drawing cards, it was determined that Mr. Terry would go first. Mr. Terry?
Well, I think the reason why I'm running for Congress again is because I want to secure the future for our children and grandchildren. And to do that, we need to do some basic things to make sure that our economy stays strong and that we can be competitive in a global world, in a data-driven world. The first is realize that we have a real asset in the United States with our energy, and we need to be energy independent. Taxes are next. Taxes, we absolutely have to reform our tax code. We have to lower it so we're competitive with the rest of the world. Then we solve the inversion problems. We don't have to worry about headquarters going overseas. Now, my opponent has raised taxes and fees 12 times. So obviously we have a different in just the last 4 years. We need to teach the skills necessary so that people earn good middle income wages. The other is rules and regulations, and in my hearings, I hear about the stifling rules on small businesses, and Gallup even says that there's less startups than shutdowns in the first time of American history. And obviously we got to deal with our debt. And so I've been hit by my opponent for voting for the Republican budget and not voting for the Democrat budget, but we are the only budget that said we will balance the budget within 10 years. I went there to make sure that we had a balanced budget amendment, and I'm still working for that, but at least I'm going to vote for a budget that's going to get us there.
Mr. Ashford.
Well, thanks, Robin, and this has really been fun, and thanks to UNO again and to the World Herald, and thank you, Lee, for this discussion. I'm running for Congress because I believe Congress has failed the American public. It is so divisive and so polarized that we can't make decisions on tough issues. We can't decide the immigration issue. We can't fix the health care bill. We can't decide, we don't have an environmental policy. We talk about individual parts of it, but we need a comprehensive energy policy for our country. It's time for a change. It's time to get back to Tip O'Neill. It's time to get back to Everett Dirksen. It's time to do things the way they were done 25 years ago. It's time for a change. Here are my promises. Number one, I will never, ever vote to shut the government down. I will never ask to be paid if and when the government is shut down. I will always put real solutions over political positions. And the day I get elected to Congress, I will find 25 friends. I don't care who they are. I could care less what political party anybody is. I would find 25 friends. It's my unicameral pledge. And with 25 friends, we will pick priorities. We will make change. We will decide real issues. We will pledge that politics has to take a backseat to solutions. That's why I'm running, and I respectfully request your vote. Thank you very much. Thanks, Robin.
Thank you. Thank you both.
Thank you.
That will have to be the last word. Thanks to both candidates for participating tonight and for your willingness to serve in elected office. Thanks to our sponsors, the World Herald and UNO Television. Thanks especially to you, our viewers and listeners, for tuning in. Look for analysis of the debate on Omaha.com as well as in Friday's World Herald. The debate will be available to watch again in the coming days on Omaha.com. We encourage all of you to vote in the November 4th election. The issues matter, and so does your involvement. Good night.